Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel, and today I'll be doing my April 2024 wrap-up. This was every month without fail, I start this video without counting beforehand how many books I read that month. Let me do it right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books completed this month. 9 prose novels completed. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 graphic novels. So pretty good reading month, although of those prose books that I read, 2 of them are probably going to end up at the bottom of my list at the end of the year for when I'm doing my ranking. I think the last place book and the second to last place book both appear in this wrap-up right here. I'm going to start with one of those books. That is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I put up a full review of this, and I set out all I need to say in that review. I was not a huge fan of Grady Hendrix going into this. I'd only read one book prior, My Best Friend's Exorcism, and I thought it was fine. I didn't think that maybe his writing style was for me, and after How to Sell a Haunted House, a book that a lot of booktubers and book talkers and bookstagrammers all really, really loved, after reading this one, I hated it. And I think that is, it's just, that's the case. He's not a writer for me. I don't vibe with his style. I had a lot of problems with this book. It did not work for me. I encourage you to watch that full review for my complete thoughts. I also read this month A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This is a science fiction, very short book, more of a novella really, about, it takes place in this world where humans had invented robots and machines that could basically do everything for them. And unlike Terminator, where like the machines rebelled, in this case, the machines and the robots basically just went away. Like they got sentient enough to be like, we're not going to really do this anymore. And so they just wander into the woods, and we make a pact with them that we're not going to bother them. They're not going to bother us. So we're back to living in a kind of analog lifestyle. Very much like traveling, like wilderness-based type of planet. And the story follows this tea monk who encounters a robot one day. The robot comes out of the forest and asks the tea monk, like, what do human beings need? Like, how are y'all doing? And ultimately, it just becomes this really short, sweet, charming story that like asks a lot of existential questions and has a lot of existential thoughts about, what is our purpose, and do we have to have a purpose, like those kinds of questions. It was pretty good. I liked this book. This was another one that showed up in a lot of booktubers like best of 2023 lists. That's why I wanted to read it this year. I thought it was good. I think it was a little heavy-handed. I think that the climax of the book, the final conversation that gets had, is one that you can kind of take out of this book and put it in any other book, and it would fit, which was a little bit of a problem for me because it didn't feel like it needed to be in this story. It felt just like there's something to be said about having a universal message and a universal theme, but it wasn't just like the message being universal. It was literally the words. Like it truly felt like I could have pulled this out of here, placed it into another book with changing maybe just like names, and it would fit in. It didn't feel unique to this world, which it bothered me a little bit. Might not bother you, but I liked it. Another book, A House with Good Bones by Kingfisher, also a haunted house book. I also put up a full review of this one. This was like a companion book to How to Sell a Haunted House by mistake, but everything that was bad in that book is great in this one. I really, really enjoyed A House with Good Bones, and I highly recommend it. I like T. Kingfisher's work. She's 2 for 2 with me. This is story of a single woman who goes back to her childhood home, and her mom is acting very strange. Things are strange around the house. Classic kind of haunted house stuff, but with an interesting enough twist on it to feel like an original story. One thing I really like about T. Kingfisher is the way that she's able to write natural characters, and when she's writing the thoughts in their head, they feel like natural thoughts. They feel realistic, and um, they feel relevant to the story being told, which is a hard thing to actually accomplish. So, really enjoyed House with Good Bones. Check out my full review for more information. Real quick, switch over to graphic novels. Read a few that I really enjoyed. Sandman Mystery Theater, Book 1, written by Matt Wagner, with art by Guy Davis, John Watkiss, and R.G. Taylor. Colors by David Hornung. And I include the colorist there because I do think the colors in this are quite exceptional. Sandman Mystery Theater was a spin-off and reboot of the Sandman, of various Sandman characters. So Sandman Mystery Theater follows the original Golden Age Sandman, Wesley Dodds, and tells new stories about him, set in the 1930s. These are pulp noir style stories that are more mature, that it's for a more mature audience. And this came about because Neil Gaiman's Sandman, which is about a different Sandman, was being published at this time for a couple years, was really, really popular. And so DC decided, let's bring back the Golden Age Sandman, see if we can get some new stories with him, get some fresh life in that. And I was very impressed by this. I found Matt Wagner's writing to be really tense and well-paced. The art style by each of the artists is unique, but feel connected to each other. It's kind of this almost grungy, scratchy type of world that these characters live in. And even though all of these artists represent that in a different way, it feels cohesive. It doesn't feel like it's too jarring, which can be very hard to accomplish. So it's 4 issues with Guy Davis, 4 issues with John Watkiss, 4 issues with R.G. Taylor. And at no point did I ever get taken out of it because of how different the art was. So I really enjoyed this. I was very surprised. I have seen Sandman Mystery Theater comic, like single issues in short boxes for years, and I skipped over them assuming that they were just like fodder meant to like capitalize on the popularity of Neil Gaiman's Sandman. Not the case. This is a great series, actually, I think, and I want to continue it. Hopefully my library has the next book so I can continue. I also read Swamp Thing numbers 65 through 77, which account for the first 2 volumes of Rick Veitch's run. So volume 7, I think, is called Regenesis, and volume 8 is Spontaneous Generation, or Spontaneous Regeneration. I don't know. But this is I read them in single issues, and these are the first comics after Alan Moore finished his Swamp Thing run, where Rick Veitch takes over as the writer and penciler, and the inker is Alfredo Alcala. And the bulk of those issues is about Swamp Thing having to deal with the fact that the world thought that he was dead at the end of Alan Moore's run because he had left the planet. And so the gears went into motion for a new plant elemental to be created, to be born. But then Swamp Thing came back and he threw off that balance. So now there's 2 plant elementals, or there's one potential and one that's still existing, and it's creating problems for everything, throwing everything out of whack. So Swamp Thing has to figure out a way to deal with that while also maintaining his relationship with Abby Arcane, while dealing with the the constant butting in of John Constantine. It's a pretty good run. There are definitely highs and lows. It started off kind of weak and then got stronger. And the way that the second volume just ended was really like setting up a potential like, wow, where are things going to go from here? I'm very curious how this is going to proceed. So hoping to finish off Veitch's run next month. Switch back to prose real quick. The Sins of the Father by Lawrence Block. This is my first Lawrence Block book. Still, getting into crime fiction, beginning my foray into that genre, which I'm not super familiar with. It's mostly just the 87th Precinct novels that I've read so far. I like this one. This one's a bit dated, and it's dated in such a way that it's not just that like you can shrug it off like, oh yeah, it was a sign of the times. Like there's integral like conversations that happen here that just feel very like they don't feel like they work anymore. Like for the mystery, for the crime aspect of this, there's a lot of conversation about homosexuality that hasn't like it doesn't track anymore. So this was a little bit off, but still like reading it from the perspective of like, okay, it's the 70s, right? Or something. Like put myself in that mindset. I get it. It was pretty tense, pretty clever. I enjoyed it. I'd read more Lawrence Block, but I just thought this was, pretty good. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Out of the Madhouse. This is the first book in the Gatekeeper trilogy by Christopher Golden and Nancy Holder. This is easily the best Buffy book I've read so far. I've read multiple by Golden and Holder already, and they were my favorite of the writers who have taken over that have done these Buffy novels so far. And this, I think, is like them really going for it. This has Buffy facing a threat where essentially like this gateway between our world and this other one where mythical creatures have been kind of like banished or exiled to. That gateway is becoming weaker, and so these never before seen threats or things that have been gone for centuries are now coming back and threatening the world. So the gang has to hit the road trip to Boston, and deal with that gateway. And it's only a third of the story. There is a conclusion here, but there's still a lot more to go. I'm planning to reading the second book next month because I did really enjoy this one quite a bit. I think this, like I said, this is probably the best Buffy book I've read so far. Another series that I read, The Angel of Indian Lake by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the third and final book in the Indian Lake trilogy, or the J. Daniels trilogy. I have a review of this one coming out, so I won't say too much, but this was a big disappointment. After how much I enjoyed Don't Fear the Reaper, this really, it reverted the series back to all the things that I didn't enjoy about My Heart as a Chainsaw, and then just amplified them. Wait for my full review. But Angel of Indian Lake, big disappointment. A classic that I read, Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. I read this as part of my back to school challenge. I also have a review of this one coming up soon. I have a funny story, or sort of funny story, that I tell about this one and when I was supposed to read it in high school, but I didn't, and how my hubris landed me in some hot water with my English teacher because of it. Ultimately, I didn't enjoy this book still, even as an adult. It was pretty boring, and I don't think that what it was trying to say was particularly interesting, or worth it for teenagers in high school either. So, not a fan of Ethan Frome. All right. The other book that I read that is going to end up being at the bottom of my list. Probably the worst book I read this year. This is really gonna piss off some classics readers. It's The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. This was borderline unreadable. I didn't find this tense. I didn't find this funny the way that some classics tend to be. Um, I I don't get it. Like gothic, sure, but maybe not even my type of gothic. Uh, I the only way I got through this book is I read one chapter a day. I tried to read it like at my normal pace, and I couldn't do it. So I decided to like have it be an end of the day book. I read one chapter a night, and it was finally over. And I was like, thank God it's over. So yeah, didn't care for that one. Oh, it's standing upright. That's creepy. Okay, back to graphic novels really quickly. I read The Crow, Dead Time. This is a 3-issue miniseries written by J.O. Barr, the creator of The Crow, but with art by Alex Maleev and script by John Wagner. I thought this was fine. Not nearly as good as the original Crow by J.O. Barr with his own artwork. I thought that Maleev, who's gone on to be a very successful artist for Marvel. I think he had a very celebrated run on Daredevil. He is young here, and I think it shows. I think he has a lot of trouble communicating clearly what's going on in his art, particularly in the first issue of this. It's very difficult to follow what's happening. There are still some really good moments and some striking images, but compared to the original, a bit of a letdown. This one follows a new Crow named Joshua, who's a Native American who's brought back by the Crow to take vengeance on the people that killed his family 100 years ago, and those killers are now in the bodies of new people who are like a street gang, and they all kind of have these memories of what happened long ago. So decent story, just the art was a bit of a letdown. Next up, I read The Return of Mr. X by Jaime, Gilbert, and Mario Hernandez. I did a read-along video of this one. I enjoyed this. I would like to read more Mr. X, which is always a good thing. If when you read the first volume, you want to read more, tells you all you need to know. Jaime Hernandez's art is terrific. I mean, if we know this from Love and Rockets, but it's equally as strong here. I don't know. I know that Mr. X has like maybe a bit of a cult following. So I don't know if like these books are still in print or if there's any way to read Mr. X anymore. I hope there is. If there is, I would check this out. If you enjoy Jaime Hernandez's artwork, I think you'd like that. The last graphic novel I read was Batman Year One by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. I might do a full review of this. I'm not sure. But just in case I don't, of like the classic DC comic books that exist, you know, people talk about the essentials like Dark Knight Returns, Killing Joke, The Long Halloween. I think Batman Year One might be my favorite. I think this might be the best, in my opinion. So I might do a full review of it. It's basically, story is just like the early year of Bruce Wayne becoming Batman and the difficulties and just like getting that up and running. It's also very much about Commissioner Gordon, or before he's commissioner, and him joining the Gotham police force and trying to change things there because it's very corrupt. And you might be looking at this and thinking, hey, Nick, where'd you get that edition of Batman Year One? I've never seen that before. Well, here's a little teaser for Saturday's video. I made this. I made this book. I bound this myself and designed it myself. And I'm going to show you how I did that from beginning to end. So check out that video on Saturday. It is a lot of fun. The last book that I finished this month was Hellhound by Ken Greenhall. I will have a full review of this going up as well. This is about a sociopathic bull terrier that will do anything to find the perfect companion for himself. Surprisingly well written. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was a bit cynical, maybe a little bit too cynical for my taste, but very well written. Keep an eye out for my full review. And then finally, Lord of Chaos by Robert Jordan, book 6 in the Wheel of Time. Did not finish this one this month. I got this much left, as you can see. I almost made it, but fell behind a little bit, and I'm really enjoying it. This one I remember being a favorite of mine the first time I read the series, and there's so many great moments in this one. I think it'll probably end up, on the top half again this time as well. So that is that. Those are all of the books that I read this month. Wow, that was a lot of talking. I would love to hear what you read this month. What were some of your favorite books or your least favorite books that you read? Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. But now it's time to get back to reading.